Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining today's webinar. My name is Charles Maddox with the I4 Group, and our webinar topic today is discussing agile methods for developing safety critical airborne systems. A very interesting topic, especially those that are new to agile methods and think that agile methods can apply in a highly regulated, compliance-driven industry. So I'm sure you'll get a lot out of today's discussion. I have a distinguished panelist with us today, Krithiga, and she's going to give, again, a good talk about how to combine some of these safety critical aspects, primarily CMMI and DO-178 criteria into your development process. Krithiga, you want to give a brief introduction to yourself and overview of your company?
Definitely, Charles. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. And I'm Krithiga Santhanakrishnan. I am the principal of XLNZ Group. I have more than 17 years of corporate experience, specifically in aerospace domain. I have worked with a lot of safety critical applications, software ranging from level A to level D. And my organization focuses on software consulting, project management consulting, ERP implementation. And in this webinar, we will be focusing, and this is an introductory webinar. It's going to be a series of sessions because it's a big topic to cover in just an hour. We are going to have a series of webinar starting with an introduction of two main pillars. One is DO-178, which is the guidance for airborne software. And the other one is CMMI. So we are going to introduce you to concepts of DO-178 and CMMI. And as Charles explained, we would like to take you through how we can implement Agile while still following DO-178 and CMMI process areas. And we will also talk about what are a couple of pain points that we have in the current projects and how we can address those pain points and challenges while implementing Agile. So as I stated, it is going to be an introductory sessions, and Charles and myself are open to any questions that you all might have online, offline, and you can contact us, and we will consider subsequent sessions on this topic as well.
All right, thanks, Krithiga. A little bit of background on myself too. I'm Charles Maddox. I'm the principal and founder of the I4 Group, and we're a consulting company as well, a training company in agile methodologies. And actually, my background is, and that's kind of where my start came from, is in aerospace software systems, and that's how I got my start in agility. And so this topic really resonates with me, and Krithiga and I have some familiarity with some common products and projects that we've worked on together. So we have a lot of knowledge here to share with you guys and some best practices on building aerospace software and applying agile concepts. All right, so without further ado, I'll turn it over to Krithiga, and you can kind of give us a background on the capability maturity model and what that's all about.
Definitely. As I explained in the introduction, we are going to focus on CMM and also DO-178. This session is not going to elaborate what CMM and CMMI is and what are the process areas of it. It's just going to give an introduction of the expectation of CMM and the expectation of DO-178C and how we can accomplish those expectations using Agile methodology. So people who are familiar with CMM, CMM is a capability maturity model. It is a methodology used to define and refine an organization's software development process. The model describes a 5-level evolutionary path of increasingly organized and systematically more mature process. Basically, what CMM does is it focuses on elements of essential practices and processes required for software development process flow. It is a method to evaluate and measure the maturity of your organization in following the software development methodology. So the maturity level ranges from 1 through 5, that is the scale. We don't call CMM as an audit. It is called as an appraisal. We have a lead appraiser who would come and appraise your organization as maturity towards where we stand with our software development processes. And earlier, CMM was focusing more on the software development. Now we have CMM practice in people management, in systems engineering. That is where different models are being integrated together. We call it as CMMI. And CMMI level 1 through 5 have different process areas. An example would be if your organization wants to be level 2, there are different process areas for level 2, such as requirements management, project planning, project management and control, and supplier agreement management, measurement and analysis, and product quality. And we have configuration management as well. This is just an example of CMM level 2, if your organization would like to achieve level 2. Similarly, we have process areas for level 3, level 4, level 5. And each of these process areas, each of these levels would have different process areas, like I explained as an example, to accomplish. And each of these process areas would have specific goal and generic goal to achieve. So one of the benefits, or some of the benefits of CMMI, is improvement in schedule, productivity, quality, because we are repeating consistently these process areas and their objectives, and showing evidences how we are meeting those objectives. And when we are accomplishing quality, productivity, and schedule, obviously we are going to get customer satisfaction. And many regulatory industry requires the organization to be CMM level 3, level 4, or level 5. So if your organization is at a particular level of CMM, then you have a competitive edge against other organizations which are not there yet. And also consistently repeating these goals and providing evidences will also generate, bring you a lot of accuracy towards your goal. So that is the key and the benefits of CMM. In order to go in detail of the CMM, each of the levels and what of the process areas, and also to help your organization accomplish those process areas, obviously Charles and I can help you out offline in the implementation goal. Here, we would like to cover the high level benefits, because the more focus is going to be how we can bring in Agile here. Next.
All right.
And while we are implementing these goals and obtaining evidences, we are going to reduce the rework. And there's a lot of risk reduction, because going through these process areas and goals help us to think at each areas, which we call as risk-based thinking towards the entire development life cycle. And also we would be reducing cost, and also reducing the defects and delivery errors, because we are going to obtain evidences and also try to meet the objectives of each of these process areas as we are going through the entire development life cycle. All right, so the first part, we've covered the CMM, and one of the key things that I would like to talk about before we move into DO-178C with respect to CMM model is the main goal. What CMM model helps us to achieve is the processes need to be well defined. It needs to be repeatable. We should have a way of measuring these processes, analyzing the measurement, and making sure we are there reaching the goal and improving it consistently. These are a couple of key aspects of CMM which would help us to drive the project and the organization. So have these things in mind when we are talking about Agile, and because we are going to explain to you how Agile is going to help you in accomplishing these goals. And with respect to following the CMM, right, would help you organization to mature at different levels. And we'll talk about how an organization, what are the benefits of having a matured organization, mature processes, and what the immature processes would lead the organization to when we talk about the Agile. The next goal for today's discussion is DO-178C. People who are familiar with Airborne software would know what DO-178C would be. I will give an introduction of DO-178C and what DO-178C helps us to achieve while developing Airborne software. And then later in the slides, let's talk about how we can implement Agile into a project that follows DO-178C. So DO-178C provides the guidance to produce software for airborne systems and equipment that performs its intended function. This is the typical definition of DO-178C with a level of confidence and safety that complies with airworthiness requirements. So basically, any regulatory agency that would certify your airworthiness software would use DO-178C as guidelines for certification. And what DO-178C determines us to do, it provides you a set of objectives for each phase of the software development lifecycle and what activities we need to follow to meet those objectives and what evidences are required to fulfill those activities and objectives. And also it talks about independence, software lifecycle data, and control category of software level. This is not a dedicated DO-178C session, but anybody who has any question with respect to DO-178C and implementation, you can definitely contact Charles and we can take separate sessions on DO-178C. So basically, when we talk about independence and software lifecycle data, the huge DO-178 expects a lot of documentation to be done and also to ensure the objectives are being met and certain levels of software. Here, the levels of software we are talking about is design assurance level. That's what we call with DO-178 terminology. It depends on the criticality level of your software. For example, if you are working on in-flight entertainment system, that could be a level E or a level D. And whereas if you're working on an actuator or flight control system, the criticality of that software will be level A, which will be determined by system safety assurance team or assurance group to determine the criticality level. And each of these levels requires independence. For example, the developer cannot be the same as tester for certain levels. Certain levels we need to have, for all the levels, we need to have a separate software quality assurance group. That's what is the independence we are talking here about. And software lifecycle data is actually for each of these phases, what are the software lifecycle data we need to produce. And control category here is related to your configuration management. And we call it as control category 1, control category 2, and what are the guidelines for each control category, which is like, for example, baselining, change control, problem reporting, and what data needs to fall under what control category and what guidelines need to be followed will be determined. So this is a very, very short explanation of DO-178. It's an ocean, it's a topic of itself. So definitely anybody needs any support can reach out to us. Next slide.
All right. Well, thanks for that, Krithiga. Yeah, thanks for that, Krithiga. So, and Agile methodologies and how they relate to those requirements. So Krithiga just gave some typical but very standard industry requirements that are placed on airborne software development projects. And now we're going to talk about the Agile methodologies and how they relate to those requirements. So not specifically the Agile methodology, but the Agile mindset approach and the Agile delivery methods that are being used. How do we reconcile which are sometimes seemingly, long-term, sequential, and some even quote, they think they're waterfallish. It's just a waterfallish way of working by nature. Big aircraft projects, that's the only way we can work them because you got big upfront requirements and the whole life cycle is just so long. How do you fit Agile into that equation? So what we have here, what I'm showing are some of the a little bit of the paraphrase Agile Manifesto principles, and let's think about how these principles then fit into your ways of working within an aerospace project. All right. So first principle, right? Or this first, what we got here, this first bullet point is satisfy customers through early and continuous delivery of value, of work, of feedback, of information. So oftentimes having what we might call iterative cycles that don't, we say, well, the plane is not flying yet, so we don't got the full value. But there's a lot of small increments of valuable discussion, information, documentation, which is often required in an aerospace and highly regulated, highly compliant environment. That is necessary. So we can iterate, we can satisfy customers through these early continuous delivery of these items. All right. One of the things about welcome changing requirements, even late in development, and Krithiga could speak to this, we talked about it before, that the change impact may be so significant in an aerospace project that it needs to go through a lot of change control. I mean, you don't want planes dropping out of the sky because of, changes that were misappropriated. So change management is big in the aerospace environment. So the way to de-risk that is to have frequent review on the opportunities to look at change. And again, that's where the iterative cycle comes in handy, and it actually de-risks the entire project altogether and makes it a safer environment. Safety critical software. That's the whole purpose of DO-178. We're trying to ensure safety. It's better to iterate and simplify and have shorter review cycles to make that happen. Deliver frequently. I just talked about that. There's no contesting that. But breaking down silos, that is something that's newer. I would say it's a newer concept to the aerospace industry, because traditionally it's so functionally siloed because of the nature of the big projects and how you need to, kind of optimize on, jet engines, for example, electronics, landing gear, communications. You need to have specialists in these silos. But if you're, anybody that's been on a project long enough or been on an aerospace project, that the integration piece is the most significant. It is the biggest factor on whether you can have that flight test and actually have a successful into a project. The sooner you integrate, usually the shorter the timelines, the better you meet the end dates. So you need to break silos in order to make that happen. You need to have collaboration with these groups working together. Why fundamentally integration and end-to-end testing is so significant. Building projects around motivated individuals. So there's like in any, this is kind of across the board, whether you're working in Agile or Agile projects, non-aerospace, working on building websites, for example, versus building safety critical products, that sustainable pace is a big factor, right? You don't want to contribute to burnout. You don't want to contribute to a bad environment that's not supportive of, the culture, generating the culture of the Agile teams and the product teams. You want to make sure that we're creating a good culture, and motivation is very key. Communication, and obviously face-to-face is the best way of working, but communication is significant. And oftentimes in your traditional waterfallish type projects, the communication is what we call asynchronous, or happening when needed, or with longer times between events where people get together and discuss the program and the project's technical dependencies or work that's happening, right? The more frequent, the more predictable cadences that we can have around communication, the better. And we set the standard to what we're trying to get out of these different events and objectives of how we need to get feedback into the development teams on making sure we're moving in the right direction. And just like anything else, any other product or project that we're working on, not just an aerospace project, actually seeing working system demos is appropriate. The aerospace industry and highly regulated industries have a history of wanting to just have a checklist to check off. We've met the boxes of the critical design review, for example. It's not that you don't have to throw that critical design review out the window, but that a part of that critical design review should be that we maybe have seen some working code. We've actually seen a system demo. So these design reviews and these checkpoints that might be a standard output for some of your state of involvement reviews or have such in part of the DO-178 method to make sure that we're meeting the right requirements. Having a working system demo, it should be a core requirement, because how can you actually verify progress if you're not actually seeing with your own eyes the work that's getting done? So maintaining a sustainable pace, I already talked about that. Moving on to continuous excellence in terms of technical practices. And that's one area where agility and the methods of CMMI really come to head, because they both promote, do we have standards in which we're building our product to? Are we building and acting and just in our processes as well? Do our processes have a standard that are repeatable? Do our product requirements have requirements that we can produce them in a repeatable way? So that's a part of the technical excellence that we're talking about, that where Agile and techniques like CMMI are completely in support of one another. Simplicity, I gave a little bit about that before, that, you know, when you're building airborne safety critical systems, the environment can get very complex. I mean, especially when you're trying to evaluate some type of safety critical nature about the product, and you need to be able to prove that you have safety considerations built into the product, whether it be through a failure modes and effect analysis report or an impact report of some sort, that you can actually prove that. But doing things in smaller batches, smaller evaluation of smaller components is always a way of simplifying your analysis. And again, getting that feedback and being more particular about the smaller bite-sized pieces to make sure that you are getting the level of granularity and, you know, focus on these safety critical aspects as needed. So the Agile process, again, kind of showing where Agile is in support of the evaluation of safety critical items, being able to simplify these safety critical items into smaller batches is always a better way to go, less riskier way to go, and produces ultimately safer products in the end. All right. Self-organizing teams that generate value, they generate the most value. So self-organization, that principle around, you know, Agile ways of working is ultimately, this is something in practice, which we've seen in some aerospace projects, where the ability of teams to self-organize themselves always kind of wins over versus having a very rigid structure in your traditional project team structure. And then having these teams kind of collaborate, work together just based on the project managers or the program managers, their directive. Whereas if you have a group that is meant to be collaborative and you're telling them that, hey, you need to reach out, you need to work with other teams, you need to form Agile teams, maybe cross-functional teams if need be, where appropriate, this enhances collaboration. And obviously, you know, you work faster and you get things done in a better way. And then like any good Agile project, you know, and any good project, even in CMMI, we recommend, you know, using even data-driven improvement from a CMMI perspective, but we should be reflecting on regular intervals to enhance the continuous improvement of the program that we're on. And yeah, why wait if you can take action on some good practices that you've identified during a sprint and or a program increment, for example, that you want to implement going forward. So these are a couple of just ways to reconcile how Agile manifesto principles, and you know, some of these aren't principles, but some of these are just ways of working, are also, they're in support of methods like CMMI and DO-178. And before we go, and I'm just going to turn it over to you, Krithiga, here in a second, but one of the biggest misconceptions in highly regulated organizations in general is that Agile and highly regulated don't go together. Like highly regulated must be done in a waterfall way, whereas Agile is more meant for building a website, you know, or product development that happens in short cycles where you can get something to your customer in 2 weeks. That, you know, unless you kind of fit that kind of concept, you can deliver your customer a functioning feature in 2 weeks and they can use it. If it's not that, you can't do Agile. No, that is not true, 100% not true. And Airborne software can definitely take advantage of this cyclical, iterative approach where we're de-risking overall development, where we're acting on the feedback that we're getting every iteration on the direction that the teams are going. We're integrating sooner than later because of again, Agile principles that we know we're working under. Overall, we get a lot of benefit in working in an Agile way. So before I turn it over to Krithiga, just be on the lookout. We're going to actually go more in depth into some actual practices and processes that we've used on these projects that we worked on together to actually show you how Agile can be a benefit to your Airborne systems projects. All right, Krithiga, I'll turn it over to you. Some of the current project challenges that you see facing Airborne systems projects.
Sure, thank you, Charles. This list is from our personal project experience that we've had using different other methodologies. Requirements definition at the beginning of the project. For most of the methodologies, that is what is the anticipation to have the requirements defined at the beginning of the project. And majority of the aircraft project would have that. But it is tough to get 100% definition, be it a system requirements or an SCD. So that is the input for our software development lifecycle to define the high-level software requirements. But we should, to an extent, anticipate changes as well. Obtaining the changes at the later end when we are following a strict waterfall approach would be very cost effective, and there would be increased rework time. But in the Agile methodologies, as we are developing sprints, we expect the changes as we go so that we do not have a huge change impact analysis at the end of the project or when we are done 3/4 of the project. We can expect changes in every sprint, and we can determine the impact analysis, and we can fulfill the change request at the sprint level itself. So that is one of the challenges majority of the project would face. Then with respect to design options, when we can have a design-based thinking as we go over the sprints and in the Agile way, instead of just having, that is one of the big advantage of using Agile. We can have, for DO-178 projects, we have different levels of testing, which is high-level testing, low-level testing, system integration testing. And we can begin writing the test cases when we start having the requirements, and we can collaborate more with the requirements team, with the development team, with the testers. So this can happen during the sprint-based, Agile-based development. And what would happen is this was lower the risk of having heavy task of low-level testing when that milestone is hit, and when the low-level test cases or statement coverage, decision coverage have a lot of bugs or coverage issues, then it comes to the development team and they'll have a whole churn of rework at the later of the project. So this can be avoided when we have this Agile-based development approach. So as I'm explaining each of the challenges that I have faced, I'm also giving a perspective of a small solution for each of this, which we will be, as Charles explained, we will be taking some project examples and going through in our subsequent sessions with practical example. And also this way of having multiple design options improve the efficiency, because we are having constant design-based thinking and architectural-based thinking as we are going through our multiple sprints. And like I explained, the first point, scope changes. Generally, in any aerospace project, if we get a scope change at, let's say, when the project is 3/4 done, we will be really going back and doing this heavy change impact analysis, and then going to the first step and identifying from the system to the high-level requirements to the design. So these scope changes would be most welcome in the Agile methodologies as we go through the sprint, and we can do it the sprint level, or a miniature level of scope changes would be easier to handle, rather than doing a scope change or change control at the rear end of the project. And then obviously improvements in all of these would help us to improve the schedule. So we would not have a huge schedule impact. I will explain. Somebody has a question on the documentation. I will explain schedule impact, and obviously it would save a lot of cost when we are taking care of all these rework, and it will also reduce the release interval. So the customer need not, we can have a frequent, even in this, we can have prototype delivery to the customer within a couple of sprints. So the customer need not wait for delivery at a particular milestone and then come back with our feedback, because a lot of these feedback, delivery and feedback takes a lot of time with respect to aerospace project, and that release interval and that time can be saved, and that would have an reduction in the delivery delays as well. So these are different approaches that personally I have followed in all in my aerospace project, and that had reaped good benefits for me. And as simple as our daily stand-ups. So when we have our daily stand-ups with the requirements, developers and the testers, we have the interaction between the team collaboratively. So that has resolves a lot of questions that we have with the team, so that we don't need to wait for the weekly team meeting or the milestone review, be it CDR, PDR. We can still have those milestone reviews with the customer, but if you follow these methodologies, the open issues we get from all these reviews would be tremendously reduced, and it would bring a lot of customer satisfaction when we are doing this way. And even people who are familiar with stages of involvement audits, we can have even sprint based on these audits, and prepare ourselves in multiple sprints for this audit, and not have one audit with the customer or the airworthiness authority at the end. So these are the personal experience and personal implementation that I have done in all of my aerospace projects and seen a good benefits out of it. So that is one of the main reasons for today's session, sharing those experience with all of you. And other thing about following Agile is visibility. Generally, with any waterfall approach or any aerospace approach, the visibility to the management I have played the role of engineering manager in many of my projects. I've been an engineering manager. The visibility would be very less when the people are working in silo and working towards a particular milestone. But with respect of introducing this Agile in that approach, the development process itself would be transparent, and management and people can be involved in the development process, and the visibility will be higher. So there would not be any surprises when there is a customer delivery, and there will not be surprises when there is a management meeting. So that brings a lot of transparency in the processes when we are working. And of course, as I explained before, it reduces a lot of design risk and implementation risk, and improves our testing efficiency as well. And if you think about all of this, this obviously will improve the quality of the product delivered, improvement in schedule, improvement in cost, and overall customer satisfaction as well.
All right, thanks for that, Krithiga. So now that essentially ends our discussion for today, so we can open it up for questions about what we just talked about. So feel free to chime in. Again, this is an overview of the overall constructs of building aerospace software using Agile methodologies. And this last slide here kind of contains all the problem areas that we typically see on an aerospace project. And then as Krithiga mentioned, we're going to have another couple more webinars after this that go into how you address these particular challenges using Agile techniques. And so that's what we're going to, but we can still talk at a high level about these and kind of give you a little taste of what we might cover in these next webinar sessions. But yeah, feel free to ask any questions right now that you have about the content that we just provided. So Krithiga, I see one question that just came through. It says, how is the documentation taken care of when adopting the Agile way of project development? And how is it different from adopting different life cycles? And I am sure Airborne, oops, give me 1 second here. I am sure Airborne systems need a good level of documentation. So how do we address documentation from your experience, Krithiga?
In my projects, if you see the Agile methodology, right, people think, of course, the big difference between Agile methodology and the aerospace project is, of course, documentation, because Agile is more of delivering the working software than being heavy on documentation. But that part, we need not be very strict. How I have followed in my project is let's say sprint 0 or the first my planning sprints, I would have when I get the system requirements and when I have the requirements team beginning to analyze and look at the requirements, my development team will begin working on the planning of the project. And also, if you take CMMI as well as in DO-178, CMMI also requires project planning and control. That is a key part of CMMI. So I have user stories and definition of done and acceptance criteria defined for my plans as well. And then I have my verification team who will be having the review checklist as part of their definition of done and user story of acceptance criteria for the planning review. And my first couple of sprints, while we are analyzing the requirements, while we are getting ready with a high level design, would be focusing on my project planning phase. And that would be my delivery. For example, we deliver potentially shippable increment to the customer per Agile. My potentially shippable increment for my first couple of sprints would be my planning documents, because that is necessity for any airborne software development. And also what we follow is we call something called as requirements verification matrix, and where we would show the bidirectional traceability starting from system requirements to high level requirements to low level requirements to code and to the test cases and backwards. So all these can be achieved with Agile tools. Collaborating with requirements management tools. I don't want to mention any specific tools here, but Agile tools and collaborating with requirements management tool can accomplish that. And in those cases, what your requirements document or design document, when you have clearly defined user stories, clearly defined acceptance criteria, you can, these documents would be an export from those tools and review of those document. Because one thing we have to be very clear about aerospace project is if you're using a particular tool for any of the method, the tool needs to be qualified. So, but we can do a manual review of what the export from the tool and it can be delivered. So your first couple of sprints would be focusing on that. One thing what when we are following any methodology is we have to make that methodology work for our business needs. You know, that is the most important part of implementing be it Agile or any other methodology, is make sure what our business goals are and how we can better or best use this methodology to fit that goal and obtain results. So that have been my philosophy while using Agile for this.
Thanks for that, Krithiga. Yeah, just to kind of piggyback on what you just said, that it sounds like that, you know, you're using the existing methodologies, Agile, the tools that we commonly use, and the artifact types. You talked about having backlog items for the documents themselves, which then this documentation is a deliverable. You might consider that it's a non-functional requirement to deliver aerospace software. So it's not functional, but it is a requirement. It is a deliverable that you need to have, and you manage the work of that just like you manage the work of anything else. And it sounds like you're using the tools that you would normally use in your Agile development, and you're using the same artifact types, and you're managing the work the very same way. So very smart idea. I can see that. Definitely, that's a great way of looking at it. I have another question that came in. It says, is there a customer representative in your daily stand-ups? Do the teams have access to the product owner to clarify requirements, discuss trade-offs, and et cetera? They didn't hear that a product owner was participating in your daily stand-ups.
Okay.
Any comments on that?
for aerospace projects, we have a systems engineer who would be our, who will own, we don't have customer representative in our daily stand-ups because customers would be by a weekly collaboration with the customer, but we have systems engineer, and we have our internal product team who would be the representative from the customer side. And of course, as an engineering manager, I would also be the voice of the customer and voice of the team on both sides for getting the input, and in case of any questions, taking it back to the customer. But having a daily stand-up with the systems engineer, with the product team and the development team definitely brings in a lot of questions. And as I said, one other thing that I probably wanted to explain is this also helped us to do a scrum of scrums, because my hardware team, we are product-based company, my hardware team and my systems team, where even though they don't follow 100% agile, but they we would do a scrum of scrum with them when we have any questions with respect to the software that we need to take it to the systems team or take it to the hardware team. And that helped us in a lot of collaboration. And majority of these questions would be sorted out with these methods. And apart from that, when there are, if there are any questions, we would definitely have customer involved. And we would have weekly meetings with the customer as well. We used to have technical interchange meeting and also project status meeting, which the team wouldn't participate with, as the lead and the managers would participate. So having, for example, there is a requirement that has hardware dependency, that has a hardware dependency, then having the scrum of scrum would help. I saw there's one more question. Is the engineering manager performing the role of a scrum master? No, I do have scrum masters reporting to me, but I am heavily involved as well. If there is, for example, my tool is automated. If there is an impediment, if there is an issue, I get an email, and I do participate in my daily stand-ups. I'm not playing the role of the scrum master, but I don't mind when the scrum master is not available, but I do have scrum master playing the role. Since I'm presenting these ideologies to you, it looks like as though I'm playing the scrum master role, but I do have scrum masters.
One of the patterns, just to comment on that question too, that I found when working in the software development environment for airborne systems, was that someone from the quality organization was a good representative, was a good person to use as a scrum master role. Because of that, they're providing the guidelines for meeting a lot of these requirements for development, making sure we're able to meet FAA requirements. So you have an accountable person that's really driving the team towards meeting some of these requirements, not just the functional requirements, but the non-functional. And so the Scrum Master making sure we're driving to, and again, following our practices that we should be following from a CMMI approach, from a DO-178 approach. And so having a Scrum Master kind of really being held to being accountable to making sure we meet not only the deliverables of the functionality, but overall the non-functional areas as well. Being able to get the software certified, it's a good part of the organization to pull a Scrum Master from being accountable for making sure the whole program meets that criteria. So
that is a good point, because even part of our organization, we have quality representative, because the entire concept of DO-178 also, right? Quality, configuration management, and certification. If you see, we call it as an integral process, which means it goes hand in hand with your development process. They don't go do your development, but you have to keep the quality perspective, configuration management, and certification perspective in your mind when you're going through your complete development and verification process. That is why they are called as integral process in DO-178. So the quality will not be an afterthought. If the quality personnel is involved and participating and understanding project planning perspective. And for example, DO-178 requires software quality assurance plan, software configuration management plan, The quality personnel can also have a user story, and configuration management person can have a user story defined, and can start producing the deliverables. And generally, quality person will look at the evidence of our reviews, and all these would be defined in your plan. A percentage of your review checklist, your test cases will be reviewed by the quality personnel and signed off. So having them actively being part of your project, and the quality issues would become less, and improvement in quality can be seen. And one other thing, of course, we can take this all in the next sessions. Having configuration management, change control is a very, very big part of DO-178. Configuration management is a very, very big part of DO-178 and CMMI. So all this, having an iterative approach and a change control tool, and implementing this in Agile would help us in the long run of change control process and configuration management process. So those issues, because the most costly mistake anybody could do is delivering a wrong configuration, downloading a long configuration and working. All those can be sorted out if the configuration management person is also involved, and change control can be heavily involved, part of the development lifecycle as well.
All right. Any more questions from anyone in the audience here that wants to ask a question? Anyone here? I have one question, Krithiga, that around independence and testing. We typically say in an Agile way of working that we want it to be collaborative, that, you know, if you do have separation of duties between development and test, and you're trying to keep them more or less like in a silo, and that's not necessarily an Agile way of working, where Agile is very collaborative. How do you reconcile the DO-178 requirement of independence in testing and having the necessary collaboration with those two groups to produce a quality outcome? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes, definitely. That's a good question, because when you have the independent test team involved, right, you have to begin thinking about your verification environment, and you have to develop we call it a software verification and validation plan. Actually, at the beginning stage of the project, it can change as we go. But having the test team involved with the interaction about the platform, about this test setup, and having a test-based thinking at the beginning of the project definitely helps. And that's how I have led my project as well. And also, when the developers when the requirements team starts writing the high-level requirements, and the test team can begin thinking about test cases and begin raising questions. When the developers are writing their requirements and acceptance criteria, the test team need to understand what the acceptance criteria is. And this should be an independent, in my organization, it's an independent team working on this. And collaborating this would sort out a lot of questions and a lot of issues. And especially when we begin to work on low-level testing, giving constant feedback, raising constant bugs, and implementing the bugs would help in the long run. And somebody asked a question.
Yeah, there's a question here. When we say quality personnel, are we referring to a separate group responsible for creating bugs, regression testing, automation? Can I take a stab at that? That's kind of what I'm passionate about that question.
I know you are. Yes, go ahead.
And the reason why is because in the aerospace industry, and actually in highly regulated industries, I think the word quality means something different than in a lot of other industries, and those using Agile, and the word testing. So testing, testing and bug fixing and things of that nature, that's an engineering activity. That's not a quality activity. Quality, when we're speaking of quality, is do we have a testing process? Do we have a development process? Are we building to that process? Is it a quality process? So there's checkpoints. Can we measure, are we being effective and developing in the same way, the same time? Do we have the reviews, the change requests processes in place, the configuration management approach? That's when we're talking about those kind of aspects in terms of how do we have a quality process and way of managing the work that we have to do in general. That is quality. That we have some practices in place that we can identify that that's how we do something. And then we can show that, yes, we do it that way. And actually we can measure how we do it, how well we do it, and so we can improve upon it. There's a quote from a guru in quality, it's kind of the author of the Total Quality Management System, Edward Deming, and kind of the godfather of Lean. He made a statement that always sticks with me, is that the word quality means that it must be specified. It means that we need to define and create like a standard. Essentially, this is how we do things. So then we can actually measure ourselves. How good are we at doing it? And that goes, the quality probably that most people think about in the testing aspect is how many bugs do we have in our code? I mean, that's one aspect of it. How good are we at creating, code without bugs? That's one aspect of it. And, but that's not the entirety of what quality means. And so in the aerospace industry and other highly regulated industries, quality means something way more. It's how we do things and how we measure ourselves that we can actually improve upon that standard in which we do things. So I wanted to point that out. So yeah, creating bugs and testing, that is a part of quality, but it is not, that's just a small aspect of it. That's called quality control on the product, not quality assurance of our overall, program that we have. We have a quality program, because yeah, you can't work with an aerospace company unless you can assure them that your programs will be operated in a quality fashion. That means, of course, then possibly you're going to deliver quality products to them, but you need to have a quality assurance program. Correct. Go ahead, Krithiga. I'll turn the next question over to you.
Quality assurance actually begins from even when we begin to bid the project. It starts from planning. It goes up to not only delivering the project, but goes to maintenance. As you explained, testing, bugs, regression, automation is part of it, but it is not completely. It is like, are we up to our standards? Are we complying to the processes? Do we have a process? Are we complying to the process? Are we measuring if we are complying? And do we have metrics to track? And are we repeatable? Are we coming back and we can do the same thing over and over without compromising on the product's quality or deliverables? Yeah. In the aerospace and highly regulated world, the word quality is more than regression, bugs, and testing.
All right.
So, any other questions?
That's about it. We got about 5 minutes left. I know there was a in the effort of starting to wrap up. I'm just going to kind of jump to our last slide here, but there was a question that came in earlier about this session being recorded. So yes, it'll be recorded. Those that were in attendance to the webinar, you will get a link sent out to you for the recording, and you can share it with your colleagues. And as mentioned at the beginning, that this is going to be a series. So those problem areas, we're going to go in depth, and Krithiga and I, we have experience actually working on these projects, and we could give you some advice on how we've solved some of these challenges using agile methods and still maintaining the requirements of CMMI and DO-178 and getting your software approved by the FAA. Ultimately, that's what the goal is, and having it be released. And so we are going to give you some firsthand examples of how we did that in some of the upcoming sessions. So with that said, you can take a screenshot of this, and you can follow up with Krithiga and I with any questions or feedback. And, we're definitely open to helping you on your project and giving you some insights. But go ahead, Krithiga, you can got some other things.
I have not mentioned my website yet, because it's going live this month end. So I will then give my website and my professional contact, but this is my cell phone number, and I'm in LinkedIn. So any question that anybody might have, even after the training, feel free to reach us out to Charles or to me. That's my email and my phone number, and you can reach me out at LinkedIn. And if you want us to have an offline session with you, or any implementation questions, or you would like to collaborate with us on any implementation, please, you can reach us out and we are available.
All right, thank you. So, and thank you guys again for joining our session. And we look forward to seeing you at some upcoming sessions. Everyone, you guys have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Charles.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.